Welcome back to Fable Talk. This week, we talk a little bit about the mysterious world of Terramythos. This will be the first of several deep dives into the lore of Fable's End. Oh, we also have a special guest. Her name is Ari. She rules. Let's go. We have a special guest today. We have Ari with us.
Hi.
Ari, if you want to do a quick little intro. I am saying your name correctly. Is that right? Is it
No, yeah,
Ari?
you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to double check.
It is a nickname though. So hi, I'm RNA, Ari for short. I am the vocalist for Survival Tactics in North Carolina. I play a lot of card games, so it's cool to be here. I got to play test with y'all a little bit. It's been really cool watching everything like come together.
You met us at playthrough last year,
Playthrough
year before?
2023, and then
2023.
playthrough 2024 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So, and will you be able to attend playthrough 2025 in October?
More than likely, but I do know October tends to be kind of packed when it comes to shows. So I'll probably be there for like a day, if anything.
Okay. We will be in North Carolina probably for more than just the convention. Because we have, for whatever reason, we have a contingency of people there. We got a little like play group there with Tylen and Jarrett, and one of our programmers lives there too. So it's like it just has become kind of a hub for us. So we'll probably go early anyway. So even if you're not able to make the convention, we would have like maybe we're looking into doing like a play event at maybe like a bar and or board game cafe or like
area
game store.
in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have between Tylen and some other people, we have some connections. So we're gonna try to make like a game night happen. So if you weren't able to make playthrough, you could make that, and you'd have plenty of advance notice too, because it's in October. So
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I also immediately was like, oh, if y'all are going to be here for more than just the convention, I definitely need to like set up a dinner because that would be fun. And I know some great places in Raleigh that y'all would love.
I'm really into that. That sounds fantastic, actually. Yeah. We've been to Raleigh a few times, but we haven't fully absorbed the like the best of Raleigh, because it's just been like, okay, we're here. Where do it's all been by necessity. So if we go out to dinner, it's like, oh, what's nearby, right? What's nearby the convention?
Yeah.
I know there are all these hidden gems all over the place, and there's probably some like really great local cuisine that everybody loves that we haven't heard of. So we're all open to getting some kind of a cultural tour of Raleigh or
I
places
need like
nearby.
an allergy list, if anything, just to make sure people are good. But I have a place in mind that's like a little bit like out of the main part of Raleigh. It's a really good Taiwanese place that I go to like once a year just for like one special occasion. So I'm like, oh wait, that's perfect. Let's make this the special occasion.
Okay, we'll do that. I think that Dragonleaf will host a dinner then. I think that's what we're gonna do. We'll just have you and Tylen and Jarrett, and if we can get Felipe and anyone else that wants to come, we can just have like a big Dragonleaf dinner. Dragonleaf being the company, that's the and I think we could probably cover it too. I think no promises on that front. No promises on that front, but
I will be saving to make sure I'm good. So
okay.
Man, also
I'll be like just finishing up a move around that time too. So
okay.
But yeah, forgot to
go ahead,
say something. I'm Tylen. I didn't actually introduce myself this episode yet. I'm one of the alpha testers for Fable's End, and I have my hands dipped in a lot of metaphorical pies here. Hopefully you'll see some of my work, not directly, but I'll be keeping stuff updated. Yes, I realize I haven't actually updated a lot of the player base. I do apologize with that. There's a lot of news that I want to speak of, but I'm waiting for Steven to bring that up instead.
Yeah, and we will once that news is solidified, we will make a formal announcement. We're just in the middle of some back and forths between manufacturer, and so we're still waiting for some confirmation on things. And we will make a formal announcement in very soon, probably be in the next week or two. And it will be good. It'll be a great announcement. So, and you all, if you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard Tylen. Tylen's been on a few times. Tylen will be a regular on the podcast. It seems like Tylen and my schedules are overlapping a lot, so he and I are able to be on at the same time. We will get others back, like Eric will be back at some point. Jarrett will be back. Well, I got to get Kwame back on here. We'll have our programmers back on, but it's going to be a kind of revolving door of guests, which I love because I like variety, and I think it's going to be really good for you as listeners to get a more the experience of the wide variety of personalities that are invested in Fable's End and how that might encourage you to play more Fable's End. Today, however, we're going to talk about Terramythos and what Terramythos is. What I will do is I will give a kind of a brief description, and then I think Tylen and Ari will just ask questions as needed, and I will clarify. Terramythos is the world for those that don't know. This will be a part of your core set. There is going to be a separate document called a guide to Terramythos. Terramythos is the world of Fable's End. This is the like fantastic world that all of this stuff happens in. And the main rule of Terramythos is that when a story is told in the real world, in our world, the characters, the locations, the items, the stuff that is talked about in that story, whether it be written or oral, that appears in Terramythos. It like manifests itself magically. And so all the stories that we've told over humanity at some point represent themselves in Terramythos. And Terramythos is this like ever-changing, ever-growing, like kind of amorphous landscape that has different regions and different kingdoms, and different groupings of fairy tales and stories that are kind of grouped together by theme or by region in the real world. But some of the major rules are, if a story is told multiple times, or every time a story is told, it's not like if I tell the story of Red Riding Hood, there's one Red Riding Hood character. It's every time that story is told in the real world, a Red Riding Hood will appear in Terramythos. But because we all kind of tell the stories differently, a different version of Red Riding Hood would appear in Terramythos. So if my version of Red Riding Hood ends differently than Tylen's version of Red Riding Hood that Tylen told someone else, then both of those versions would appear in Terramythos, and they would kind of like populate a specific region of Terramythos as a landscape. Is this making sense so far? Am I missing anything? Okay.
I'll actually ask a question right out of the gate because this is
Sure.
something that it's not necessarily been bugging me, but it's kept me curious. When a character dies or disintegrates, does something happens to them to where they aren't able to function in the world of Terramythos anymore? What happens to them? Do they just become like part of the metaphorical graveyard that exists in each region? What goes on with that exactly?
So I think that's where things get a little complicated for Terramythos, because Terramythos is a like reflection of the real world. Um, I when a character dies in Terramythos, like, so as the character appears after a story's been told. So let's say that I will tell a story about Red Riding Hood, and she is 9 years old, and when I tell that story, a 9-year-old appears in Terramythos. Now, to that person, that 9-year-old, it's not like they have no memory of themselves outside of this. They do exist in that world, but for them, they have their own existence that's entirely separate from the real world. They're like generated like a it's hard to explain. It's like a not an assembly line. That's like totally the wrong
It's
metaphor, but
basically they have their own presets off of the stories that we're telling, but they also have their own quirks in various thought processes for when they actually appear.
Yeah, when they appear. And what happens is that they become more like an archetype of a person rather than like a I'm Red Riding Hood, and then they meet another Red Riding Hood, and they're like, well, I'm also Red Riding. That's so weird, and they all just get together, and then there's like a Red Riding Hood convention that happens every year. It's not like that. It's more like the character, the like sort of archetype of what that character is, pops up into Terramythos, and as an archetype, they can have their own identity. They can be like, I go by Alice or whatever. Um, but I am like fulfilling the sort of storyline of the story that's being told in the real world. Like my destiny will be, oh, well, part of what my journey as a character will be is like my grandmother gets eaten by the wolf, right? But then they continue to exist beyond the story. So they may have like fated events that happen to them, but beyond those events that happen to them, it's not like they just disappear as soon as that's over. They still can live a life, and that's where like the Terramythos world starts to become more its own thing, where you kind of like you're like sprinkling all these different archetypes of characters all over a specific region or a specific kingdom, and then you just say like, okay,
Good luck.
go interact with
Go
each
forth.
other,
Yeah.
go forth, go live your lives, and then those their behaviors and their personalities and the things that drive them are sort of like based on what the stories are in the real world, and as a result they will fulfill specific like destinies while also behaving in a certain way that matches their character, but they can have a life that extends far beyond the story. So to answer your question, this is like a really long roundabout way of kind of explaining how this all works. To answer your question, a character like Red Riding Hood could grow up to be 20 and she could die, right? And then have a grave in Terramythos. And that would be like a part of Terramythos. It would be a a like a long-standing
A
like
fixed
site,
point. Yeah.
like a point on the map of Terramythos, like a point in there. But as time passes, these stories start to if that story is still told in the real world, then you have this connective tissue between Terramythos and the real world, where as long as the story remains like relevant, that character will continuously pop up in Terramythos over and over and over again. So you might get like a more modern version of Red Riding Hood, but like the legacy of that sort of archetype will remain in Terramythos. So the gravestone of that character would remain because it's like connected to the like history of the character itself, right? If the Red Riding Hood that went out and lived until she was 20 and then like faced a giant wolf as part of her like revenge scheme, but she lost and then she died and then she was like lionized and by the locals, and they made this like shrine to her and they made a gravestone or whatever. That headstone would remain there as long as there is like a reflection of her relevance in the real world. If everyone just stopped for if we totally stopped telling the story of Red Riding Hood and everybody forgot in the real world, then like the headstone and the legacy of those characters would just kind of like start to fade away, or they would drift from their original um
Interesting.
archetype. So like if Red Riding Hood were in as she was young, if she was like 12 and her whole thing was like the story with the wolf and the grandma, and then the real world was like, yeah, we're not really into this Red Riding Hood story anymore. We're telling this other story now. The Red Riding Hood in Terramythos would continue to live, but she would become more and more disconnected from that uh, identity. She might just become a normal person. Like it'd just be like, oh, when I was young, and I had my Red Riding Hood, and with the wolves. Now I'm an old woman, and I'm
It was
just
just
here
a
in my
phase, Mom.
cottage. Yeah, yeah, right. Like they would kind of just adapt to the way the world is has been made for them.
Gotcha.
So the only way for like characters and archetypes to permanently disappear from Terra Mythos is if their stories are forgotten in the real world. And that's kind of a big point of contention in Terra Mythos, where this is like this existential fear that they have of like being erased. And the like outer limits of Terra Mythos are this sort of like unknown, faded grayscape where like stories that are sort of remembered but not really remembered well those characters kind of like they live in this like purgatory of not knowing who they are, and then they don't really know what their purpose is anymore, and then eventually they just kind of fade into the nothingness. So like the center part of Terramythos is kind of like where everything happens. That's like the central conflict of Terramythos and all the and then like as you reach the borders of Terramythos, that's where all the characters start to fade away, and the stories that are forgotten or long forgotten, like either they're sort of like, I'm not really sure, I don't really remember my past, I don't really know who I am. And then like the further you travel into that gray zone, into the haze, the like less there is. It just feels like you're walking in nothing. It's like everything is foggy. There's no real like identifying features in the landscape. Like everyone is just kind of generic looking. No one really has any like special personality or purpose. It's just sort of they're kind of, not like zombies, but just almost like ghosts. So
it's okay. It's Kraken's job in order to deal with that, or at least that's what they'll say.
Yeah, Kraken's job.
Yeah.
So are there other questions that we want to explore potentially, maybe, or do we want to start talking about kingdoms, or how do we want to pursue this? This is all like very informal, by the way. For anyone listening, this is kind of a primer. This there's a lot of this that's already like formally written down that you would get in your core set. That kind of doesn't explain it exactly in the same way, but this is more of the abstract of like how Terramythos functions. But all the kingdoms are like fully, there's a pretty good primer that's in the core set.
All right, do you got anything, or am I good to ask a second question?
Okay, so before you ask the second question, I do want to ask, because I did want to ask about kingdoms. So the moment you were like, let's move into kingdoms, I was like, oh, I did have a question about a specific kingdom.
Sure.
But I know Zai said he has a second question.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you shoot, and then I'll ask my question.
All right, now I feel put on the spot. So this isn't directly relating to Terramythos. This is more so like the map itself. I don't know. You said that you're going to be showing the map on the screen. Hopefully, I don't look like a fool. How did you come to the shape of this? Was there anything that sort of sparked your interest when you were making it like this, or was it just I'm going to throw shapes at a wall until something looks marginally functional?
I think so the way that I now what everyone's going to see on the screen is going to be the like map of Terramythos as it exists in this is going to require a little bit of explanation, because this map will not stay the same throughout the course of the game. So right now, where the game exists in the core set and the next following expansions is what's called the Middle Era. It's akin to the Middle Ages of Terramythos. So the stories are kind of like contained within a set time period, and that time period is like Middle Ages Europe to early late 18th century,
Probably
and that's kind of like
probably just coming up to the Gilded Age.
yeah, right. Yeah, we're like hitting. We're kind of, and depending on where you are, you will experience like a more pronounced sense of place and time. But generally speaking, the Middle Era is kind of like in that time period. So the stories are, and it's supposed to reflect like the time period that these stories were told. So this is prior to science fiction existing in the human world. So the Middle Era does not have like, if it had science fiction elements, they would be very crude and very of their time, right?
It's
Like
alchemy.
it would be,
That's what it is.
yeah, it would be, yes, exactly. It'd be like alchemy. It would be, there's a lot of magic. There's a lot of, if there is some sort of like constructed thing, it's done so in a way where like people don't really understand. It's kind of like it would be like a Frankenstein's monster where it's like, oh my God, what is this? This is brand new to us. This idea of like building a thing that's alive, that's not alive. So for the map itself, part of it is kind of trying to piece together, like part of it was like I had a vision in my head of how this would look when I was figuring out how Terramythos worked as a like a continent. And it's kind of keeping in mind the personalities of all the kingdoms and like what I thought would make the most sense for them to border each other. For example, the Raven Kingdom and the Wolf Kingdom make sense as borders to me, because I think that the woods of the Wolf Kingdom would spill over into the woods of the Raven Kingdom.
Oh, absolutely.
Those two things are there. There's a lot of similarity there. And for the way that the Scorpion Kingdom is set, I wanted it to feel like it's a little bit more not isolated, like it does border, but it's not super isolated. Sorry, it is kind of it's like these, and in the way that it's represented in the map is actually a little inaccurate because of the way the map this map has a specific purpose that we'll get into way later. We don't want to talk about it right now, so it doesn't really fully accurately represent how large the Scorpion Kingdom is. There's a lot of space in the Scorpion Kingdom. It's like a very large, open desert. Like there's, it's like huge. Yeah, it's called the like landscape is called the Sand Sea, and the Sand Sea is just this giant desert, and there's little pockets of like civilization within those deserts, and there's it does it has different geographical features, like there's canyons, and then there's like these giant dunes, and then there's like systems of caves that exist, and a lot of it's very mysterious. A lot of it's like hard to find, hard to get to, but there's basically like just a large distribution of forgotten wonders and treasure and magic that's kind of all sprinkled throughout this entire kingdom, but it's just like really hard to find um, when you're exploring the landscape. So that landscape felt pretty harsh to me, and Wolf is also a pretty harsh landscape. Wolf is a very difficult kingdom to live in. It's like unless you were a giant apex predator, you're going to be hungry all the time in a wolf kingdom. So it made sense for like wolf and scorpion to share a border where it's the most harsh for both of those kingdoms, right? Because the scorpion kingdom is mostly desert. Desert is not a friendly environment.
Nope.
Well, neither is the wolf kingdom. And then with the Kraken kingdom was actually the hardest because it's mostly water. So
it is mostly water. That is true.
It's mostly water. Like what happens in the Kraken Kingdom is like it's all about the adventure and the unknown, and it's about exploring how it's like going and finding new, charting new waters, basically, like finding those uncharted waters, and there's a lot of like pirates and fishermen and explorers going into all these different areas of the like ocean of the Kraken Kingdom, and just either discovering a new island, discovering a new species of like giant sea monster, going and hauling some exotic creature to bring back to one of the port towns to either sell or to record for various reasons.
Post.
Yeah, and that kingdom, and the way it's positioned on the map now, and like this is a pretty like preliminary map. This could change as we explore this further. But I think it made sense to me to have that, have access to all three kingdoms because it would be like a trading kingdom, right?
Yeah. No,
so currently on the map, you can get to virtually all the kingdoms through the Kraken Kingdom. Because of the way that the water channels work, you can go through the Wolf Kingdom at its like at the border of the Kraken Kingdom, the Wolf Kingdom. You can do some trading along there. You can do trading in what's called Ravenheim, which is the Raven Kingdom. That just means Raven home. Along that coast, you can trade pretty easily with the Kraken Kingdom. And the same with what's currently called Al Kabir, which is like a big that's like one of the more populated areas or populated regions of the Scorpion Kingdom. There's some like port towns and cities along the coast. And there's lots of trading that happens between Kraken and Scorpion along those. So that's like some of the logic there, but it's also like the description of Terramythos is so amorphous, right? Like it's it's constantly changing. So even as it's set, the very nature of this, when we travel to different eras, because there's the Gilded Era, there's going to be the Modern Era, there's going to be the Ancient Era. This map will change. It will look different. And it will try to fulfill the purposes of the needs of like how each of those kingdoms' identities will change as they are older or more modern, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Not follow.
Does that answer your question, sort of, Tylen?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You answered my question.
Oh, did? Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna ask more questions about specifically Wolf and the design of it.
Sure. You can ask more questions about that too if you want. If you want, I can go into how what Wolf is, in terms of like a landscape or as a concept. I can elaborate that if you want.
More so as a concept, like how do you pick and choose where certain characters and like certain antagonists, protagonists, just where people and the creatures go? That's something I was really curious about. Like a lot of things, it's just like, okay, thematically, it makes sense based on the landscape or based on this. But sometimes I'm also just like, oh, okay, but especially with what you told us earlier about every time it's told, every time there's a shift in the story, a different variation comes out of that. So it made me wonder, like, okay, then would the same character be able to belong to another kingdom?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Mm.
They could, and they will. We will see that as the game evolves. Certain characters will find themselves in other kingdoms. That is partially due to its relationship to the real world, but it's also partially due to the fact that, like I said before, Red Riding Hood will find herself on a journey that has her leave the Wolf Kingdom and travel to other kingdoms. So there will be versions of Red Riding Hood who end up in the Kraken Kingdom. There will be versions that will end up in the Scorpion Kingdom, as like a completely different kind of character. Um, but to answer your question for like how do we place these characters in the different kingdoms, um, initially we had the kingdoms designed as like here's a specific grouping of stories and tales, and Grimm's fairy tales were the Wolf Kingdom. That was kind of like where if it was a Grimm fairy tale, it was going to belong to Wolf. We also had like a connection to sort of an Eastern European, even Russian folklore, where all this stuff they all kind of had like a very similar thematic tissue. Scorpion was Arabian Nights. Kraken was kind of like sailors' tales or sea monsters, and then Raven is Gothic horror. And what we found is that over time, like that was so limiting because, um, yeah, how do you when something doesn't quite fit into any of those, then like how do you figure out where it goes? And so part of the answer is the eras. Like part of the answer is different eras will represent different things and different, the Wolf Kingdom will change in different eras. But each of the kingdoms has like a philosophy or a kind of a worldview that it operates from. And what we do is we say like, okay, let's take Dorothy, for example, from Wizard of Oz. Now, when we look at her worldview and how she views the world, we say like, okay, where do you think that fits in the most? Or we could even say like, what's her journey? Like, what's her predicament that she's in? Does that fit into Raven? Not exactly, right? Does it fit into Wolf? Kind of. Does it fit into Scorpion? Not really. Does it fit into Kraken? Not really at all. Kraken doesn't really have the same kind of aesthetic. It doesn't have the same like value system that Dorothy. But there's a little bit of overlap. Does it fit into these other two kingdoms? And the answer is yes, it does. It fits. I think it fits specifically into one kingdom that I'm not going to spoil right now. But that would be my placement of it. But it's also like sometimes you just kind of do it by feel, and there's a, we can take it by what we believe the story is about, and then try to boil it down to its like essential, or reduce it down to its like most concentrated message or value, and then try to figure out where that value would work the best in which kingdom. And then, or we could say like the aesthetics of this really match the Wolf Kingdom, so it just makes sense for her to be in the Wolf Kingdom. Or the relationship that she has between another character that's very obviously belongs to this other kingdom, well, then she should belong in that kingdom too because they're related, right? Like Frankenstein's monster obviously belongs in Raven, so Dr. Frankenstein would also belong in Raven, regardless of whether or not Dr. Frankenstein has a philosophy that really truly maps onto Raven. But it's like the connective tissue is too strong. You would have to keep them in the same kingdom because like he's not traveling from all the way down in the desert all the way to the Raven Kingdom and then like making his monster and leaving. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Like he would be of that era, even though he doesn't necessarily have the same values as everyone else in that kingdom. And when we're doing this, we also try to make sure that we're not saying like all of the bad guys are here and all the good guys are here, right? It's more like there are bad guys and good guys in both kingdoms, and it's more interesting to kind of create philosophies that work for both of them. So for Scorpion, for example, the like slogan that Scorpion has is "seize opportunity," but that's like very ambiguous and from a moral standpoint, right? Like seizing opportunity can be really great or it can be really bad. So you can have villains who are like, well, seizing opportunity means like assassinating the Sultan, like plotting a coup, but it could also mean, giving an opportunity to somebody who is in a less fortunate situation than you are, right? Or like I'm I'm down on my luck and I find something that will help me, so I should use that thing, right? Like I can find the lamp and make a wish. That's not necessarily like bad or good. It's just, it works. It kind of like works for all different alignments. It could be evil, neutral, or good. And we try to, all the kingdoms have that same kind of philosophical groundwork where the characters aren't bound to being good or evil. They're just bound to having like a general sense of like this is our worldview. This is how we operate.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I just want to make sure.
No,
I know
that
I've been
makes
talking a
sense.
lot.
Sorry, I'm like.
Okay. No, you don't have to apologize. I'm if I have spoken too much, I just want to make sure I'm not saying a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense.
No, not by any means. I'm following. I'm just
Okay.
really just listening. That's kind of why I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to talk very much.
No, yeah,
Definitely
totally.
more so
Totally.
here to just, learn a lot more about. I had a lot of lore questions or like just lore interests more so than questions anyway, when I was just like playing a lot of things like when I started playing the online and then when we started playing like TTS and just stuff like that.
Sure. Well, in the lore, it's come a long way, because one of the things that's really challenging about this is that trading card games aren't great at telling stories. They're really great at telling like environmental. They're great at exploring an environment or exploring like a culture, but like telling individual stories is really hard because it's just kind of the nature of like there's so many cards and the cards don't. You're not like how many battles do we have where Red Riding Hood dies? It's kind of like, well, how do you make a story out of that, or how do you make like a linear series of events from like one card when you have multiple cards in your deck of that represent that card, and then also like the outcomes of what happens in a game are different in every game. So it's like playing the game while you're telling a story. It's very difficult to make that through line. But I think what we want to do with Fable's End is really like create a very rich environment where all of the kingdoms are very well thought out and they're very, they have a very distinctive identity, and they should feel different, not just mechanically, but also aesthetically and philosophically. And like I want to build out more of this, like the location of them, and talk about like what is Al Kabir, what is it like to be there, what is it like to be in the Whispering Dunes, what are the features of that, how are they different when you're in this region versus this region. The same if like the Republic of Pirates in the Kraken Kingdom versus Sunhaven. Those two are not necessarily allies with each other, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of conflict that happens between them, but they still work with the conflict within the Kraken philosophy, right? Or at least, at the very least, the Kraken aesthetic. And then there's like all sorts of little mini stories we can have in there. Like, well, this character, their backstory is that they are the king of the Republic of Pirates. and that he wants to marry the Princess of Sunhaven or whatever. But obviously the Princess of Sunhaven is like, absolutely not. You are not at all. Or, it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be a princess. It could be anybody. It could be anything we want it to be. It doesn't have to be that normative. It can be whatever. But I think the idea is that we establish enough personality within each of the kingdoms where we have like, oh, here's a map that you can look at. Here's this location where these characters are from. Here's this location where these characters are from. Like, the Hexenwald has witches in it. The Drakenwald has dragons in it. You're like, oh, okay. Well, I don't want to be in the Drakenwald because that sounds like I will get eaten and die. What is the other place? Like, where is the place in the Wolf Kingdom that's safe? And the answer is nowhere. The answer is you leave. But it's like, pick your poison. Like, which danger do you want to deal with? Which one are you more equipped to handle in the Wolf Kingdom? And like that already paints a picture of like how you operate in Wolf. That gives it sort of a framework or a story that you can interpret as a player or just as like someone who's interested in the world. That's not just like Wolf Kingdom has these stats or Wolf Kingdom has this like ability, right? Like tracking as an ability has a relation to what happens in the Wolf Kingdom. It's not just a mechanic, it's also like a device that connects it to the lore of like, well, what is it like in the Wolf Kingdom? Well, you're either hunting or you're hunted. Like that's kind of the way that works. Only the strong survive.
Mm.
So anyway, I've been talking a lot.
No, you're fine.
We're good. We're already at 38 minutes, which is kind of insane. That went by really quickly. I don't know if it went quickly for you, but it went quickly for me. Do either of you have anything or any last questions or anything you want to add about the lore or anything you're hoping to see in the lore? This is again like very informal, so we will have more. There will be more and more and more of the lore discussion. So,
not off the top of my head.
Okay. Ari, anything you're looking forward to, or anything you hope to see in the future?
Truthfully, I just want to play.
Okay.
I want to see this game like finished so bad, and I want to just see like both the physical and the digital. I want to see what things have become now because I haven't gotten to play in a few months.
Yeah, that's true. You haven't been.
We can fix that.
We can fix that. We can fix that very, very easily.
Fix that.
I would love for you. I'm really excited for you to see the new cards and the new stuff because I think it's really exciting. So we will solve this problem. You will be able to play, and you will be able to play sooner than. You will definitely be able to play the full game before playthrough, for sure, 100%. That I can guarantee you.
I'm very excited.
Me too. I'm really excited. I'm excited for you, and I think it's going to be great. So on that note, we'll wrap it up because we are already going past the 30-minute mark, but I think it was all worth it. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank Ari and Tylen for being here. I know it's hopefully both of you will come back. I know Tylen, you'll definitely come back. Ari, I would love to have you on. And also, Ari, if you want to plug, I know you are in a band. You're in a hardcore band in North Carolina, in Raleigh, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to take a moment to plug your band so that anyone that is listening to this wants to go check that out.
Well, okay, but I also have to acknowledge that, yes, I would love to be on again. I want to, especially when I have time, because this was just like by complete chance. I just got off of work early and was just here and wanted to say hi to Zai, so worked out very well. But as for my band, we are Survival Tactics based in North Carolina. Everything in terms of like social media and finding the music is under Survival Tactics.
And I'll put a link in the description for anyone that's interested.
Yippee!
Yeah.
We make very angry hardcore music.
So if that's your jam, then go check them out. For sure. Okay, we are going to wrap it up here, but everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Thank y'all for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here.